Welcome back. As you're ready, adopting a posture, finding a way to sit for meditation. Allowing your eyes to close, allowing your body to be upright without being rigid. Adopting a relaxed, upright posture. Physically softening, releasing, relaxing any unnecessary tension in the face, shoulders, chest, belly. Remembering why you're here, to meditate, to connect. This whole Buddhist path has just one aim, one goal, one intention: to alleviate suffering, to end confusion, ignorance, to experience wisdom and compassion. And utilizing the meditation technique of mindfulness, present time, non-judgmental, kind awareness, develops wisdom. Wisdom ends suffering. We begin with the simple practice of focusing the attention on the sensations of the breath, mindfulness of the breath, ignoring the mind, let the thoughts be in the background. Give your full attention to the body sitting and the sensations created by each breath. As you breathe in, know that you're breathing in. As you breathe out, know that you're breathing out. Be mindful of the constantly changing nature of the sensations of the breath. Investigate the beginning, middle, end of each half breath. How does it feel? How do the sensations change? Leading to the wisdom, the insight into impermanence. Paying attention to the breath and body, the first foundation of mindfulness, can both teach us about the impermanent nature of sensation and also help us break our addiction to thinking, our tendency to be so identified with our thoughts and emotions, letting the thoughts be in the background, constantly returning to the breath, disengaging, returning to the embodied present time experience, letting go of the past and the future. They're all in our heads and the mind. you're new to this kind of meditation, stick with the breath for now. Let the Buddha's instructions expand from a narrow focus on the breath to a more inclusive, non-judgmental, present time, kind awareness of the whole body, the heart, the mind, the sense doors of hearing and seeing, smelling and tasting, and even the thoughts about the future and past that are happening in the present, here and now, the mind thinking, remembering, worrying, craving, judging, fearing, whatever the mind is up to. Whatever we're paying attention to, we try to investigate the impermanent nature of that phenomena at the sense doors, smells and tastes, sounds, images, sensations, arising and sustaining and passing. We investigate the feeling tone of our experience, whether you're paying attention to the breath or a thought arising, an emotion, trying to identify the feeling tone. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? What's the mood like in your heart? Is it a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral mood? The sensations in your body that you're feeling, the breath itself, the sounds. Mindful, awake, aware, present to what's happening in the body, in the heart, the mind, how it feels, how it's changing. When we pay attention like this, we see the suffering we experience is all about resisting what's happening or craving for it to be different than it is, clinging. For the rest of the meditation, renounce clinging. Set the strong intention to let go of needing your experience to be any different than it is, to accept what's happening moment to moment, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Radical acceptance of the impermanent nature, reality that we are. Meditation teaches us to be uncomfortable, to sit with whatever's happening, even if it's unpleasant, to turn towards it, to feel it, to see how it's changing, even pain in the body or the heart or the mind. It's a process, it's unfolding. The feeling tones lead to more compassion for pain, tolerance, mercy, compassion, and to understanding the impermanent nature of pleasure, we learn to let go. To experience what is pleasant with non-attached appreciation, the arising, sustaining, and passing of pleasant thoughts or emotions, sensations, sounds.
Sweet. You want to sit with me?
Sounds and sensations, thoughts and feelings, arising and passing through awareness. Present time, non-judgmental, kind awareness of this human experience, this body with these sense doors, with this heart and mind. Nothing worth clinging to, nothing worth suffering about, just thoughts, just feelings, just sensations. So some reflections on renunciation tonight. What is it? So, of course, the whole conversation, the whole picture in Buddhist context is how do we end suffering? How do we find a way to live our real lives that doesn't make it more difficult than it needs to be? We don't create extra suffering on top of the already often uncomfortable reality of having a body and a nervous system and a mind. And important when the context is important that in Buddhism, when we talk about ending suffering, we're not talking about ending pain. The equation is pain met with compassion, no suffering, just pain. Pain met with resistance equals suffering. It's just, anybody that's new, it's always important to remember, like we talk about, the end of suffering. And then sometimes our mind thinks like, oh, cool, then I'll be comfortable all of the time. I won't feel pain anymore. And that's not part of the equation at all. Pain is a given, it's unavoidable. It's our relationship to pain that creates suffering. And so all of the conversation is about what can we do to alleviate that reactive tendency that we have that causes suffering in our life. And the Buddha's Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path are the teaching, are the path, are the directions, the map to ending suffering. And of course, it begins by the First Noble Truth, acknowledging and admitting and accepting the suffering that we're experiencing. First, in order to get free, we have to break denial. We have to stop pretending like we're okay and everything's fine and we're not suffering. First, I have to look at like, oh no, there's all of these sometimes subtle or sometimes not so subtle, gross forms of suffering in my life. Not just pain, my relation, all of the aversion to pain. Not just pleasure, but the impermanent nature and the repetitive nature of my craving and clinging. Second noble truth. The cause of our suffering is repetitive craving. The third truth is it's possible to end it. It's possible to get free. Buddhism's a very optimistic, very hopeful, very empowering, very I don't know. Yes, optimistic. The teaching is you in this lifetime can become a Buddha. everyone in this lifetime can end suffering if you thoroughly train your mind, if you're willing to really deeply practice meditation and renunciation. And so, as I said in the beginning, what we have to add is these wisdom practices, like training the mind, deep meditation. I don't think enlightenment's possible without deep, long-term meditative training. You can't think your way to it. You can't read your way to it. You really cannot have a psychedelic experience on the way to it. Shit does not work. But long-term meditation works, develops wisdom, not temporary intoxicated states, but a wisdom that we can embody, that we can live. So we have to add meditation, we have to add generosity. Maybe some of you already are generous, kind, loving people. I wasn't when I started the path. So I was like, I had to come from this self-centered, angry, fear-based, addictive place. And then I had to start a meditation practice and start being of service to others and start getting out of my self-centeredness through, there's a lot that I had to add. Study, practice. And then what do we have to remove? What and what do we have to renounce? In the classic formulation, the very low, Buddhism asks, I feel like for householders, pretty low level of renunciation. There's not a whole lot. The Buddha says, there's like, I guess, the 5 precepts. If we look at the Eightfold Path, 3 of the 8 factors are about renunciation. And so it's 5 precepts and then speech and livelihood. So, and all of the ethics and renunciation in the Buddha's teachings are about karma. None of them are senseless morality or kind of judgmental morality. They're all very practical understanding of how karma works, because unskillful actions create negative karma. Lying, stealing, cheating creates negative karma. All of the ethics around how we communicate, right speech, wise communication, around how we behave, right action, wise action, ethical, not lying, not stealing, avoiding sexual misconduct, avoiding killing, and avoiding intoxicants that are more likely going to put us in a place where we might lie, steal, and cheat. The whole renunciation in Buddhism around intoxicants isn't that there's anything unethical or karmically unwholesome about getting high or drunk or buzzed or tripping balls or whatever you're into. It's just when you block mindfulness, you block renunciation, and you're more likely to be dishonest when you're intoxicated and create that karma. And you're more likely to be flirty when you're intoxicated and create that karma if it's not an appropriate kind of sexual energy. And you're more likely to be unmindful and kill, whether it's an insect or a living being, all of the drunk driving that happens, all of that is kind of like, they're not all alcoholics, but people are buzzed and they're driving and they have lost their mindfulness of their environment and all of that kind of death. That's a teenager, 16-year-old driving, and kind of every time I think about it, and that it's like it's the #1 killer of teenagers, like it's car accidents, and it's almost always drunk driving, kind of. So that precept around avoiding intoxicants is not about ethics. It's about being careful with the karma producing behaviors and intoxicants leading to people being less careful, less wise, less skillful. So subtracting killing, subtracting lying, and honesty, I mean, there's a whole factor of the Eightfold Path to the renunciation around speech and around how we communicate, wise communication. And some of that is stop lying. And lying has so many levels to it. The renunciation of exaggerating or minimizing or omission, right? Sometimes we say lying and that kind of as though it's those big intentional misleading people, like very intentionally, I'm going to tell you something that's obviously not true. I know it's not true. I'm just trying to mislead you. But then also within wrong speech and is it was kind of true, but I exaggerated it. There was some truth to it, but I minimized it. Or there was something that was very much true, and due to the nature of our relationship, I should have told you and I had omitted it. Not telling the truth in certain circumstances, which is also lying in the same category, same sort of karmic consequence of like, we have the kind of relationship where I really should have told you and I didn't. I omitted that. This is probably not a good example, but the other day I was out in my fancy lowrider. I pulled up to the gas station and this young lady came up to me and she said, "I love lowriders. Will you take me for a ride?" And I said, I think my wife probably wouldn't like that. But yeah, sure, jump in. And I took her for, and I came over here and came over and got Sebastian, and Sebastian went with me, and he was like, "Okay, I'm your whatever, I'm your wing, whatever. We're cruising together, low riding." And then we dropped her off, and I went home, and I told my wife, but it was one of those situations where like I wasn't going to do any, nothing, but not telling omitting that would have been negative karma. Like, what'd you do today? Oh, nothing. I didn't take some strange young lady for a ride. I told her, I went home and I was like, I have a stupid, admission. Some girl asked me for a ride and I gave her a ride on the lowrider, and she's like, okay. But not telling would have been a lie, because that's the nature of our relationship. Those times where it's like, it would be inappropriate to do something like that and not tell, not admit it. Communication, we're constantly communicating. I feel like it's important that not only did the Buddha give it its own factor of the Eightfold Path, he said, right speech, don't lie. And then again, in right action, put it in there again in the 5 precepts. It has its own section of the Eightfold Path, and then it's also in right action, avoid lying. Avoid stealing, honesty, not only in communication, but in action indeed. When I started practicing Buddhism, I was a liar and a thief. And so it wasn't easy. Some of you are like already kind of good people. Some people come to Buddhism and they're already like kind of honest and kind of, that was not the case for me. So this was a real learning kind of uphill battle for me. I got into recovery and started practicing Buddhism when I was locked up for stealing, and I'd been lying, my whole life, and I was an addict, and so it was a real gradual process, learning the renunciation of not doing what I wanted to do, not lying when I wanted to lie, not stealing when I wanted to steal, took me some months and years of recovery and meditation practice to learn to tell the truth. even this term renunciation, it sounds to me, I don't know about you, but to me, it sounds so like final. So like you're just like, I renounce you forever. I renounce lying and I'm never going to lie again. Good luck. I renounce stealing and I'll never take anything that's not freely offered again in my life. Good luck. I renounce violence and I'll never be unkind to anyone ever again. Good luck. I feel like a big part of the renunciation, one of the other ways that the Buddha, or it's translated anyways, is it talks about abandoning that which is unwholesome, unskillful. Even, and again, abandoning to me, it sounds very final. Like I abandoned greed. The process, in my experience, and I think it's common for us, is that first we renounce, or we break or we abandon the belief that it's okay to lie and steal and cheat. Maybe you had better, I don't know, childhoods. Maybe you already come to the Dharma knowing it's not okay to lie and steal and cheat. That was not my experience. I didn't have much of a moral compass for whatever reason. I came to the Dharma thinking like, oh yes, get away with whatever you fucking can. Steal it. If you can get away with it, do it. Lying, try. If you can get away with it, do it. Like I believed in lying and stealing and violence and hatred. I actually thought that hatred was a kind of noble attitude, and because there's so many people that are worthy of hatred, and that it was sort of a kind of course we hate the ignorant fucks. That's a good thing. You got to hate them. You have to. So coming into the Dharma and learning that, oh, my hatred, my dishonesty, is hurting me. Took me, and that this is the important part, I think, of renunciation, is that we have to see how these behaviors, which, it can be quite fun to lie and cheat and steal. And if karma wasn't the thing, it would be like, oh no, it's quite fun to tell a tale and get over and to, but because we're karmically creating negativity for ourselves, we're creating suffering in our own lives when we do these things. And so all of the renunciation teachings are self-care. None of it's moral rules. None of it's don't do it because it's bad. It's all, if you want to be free from suffering, be quite careful with how you communicate and how you behave, because of the karma of all of our intentional actions. So honesty, integrity, and so there's the specifics of the 5 precepts: killing, lying, stealing, sexual misconduct, intoxicants, recreational use of intoxicants. Right speech, only speak, only communicate that which is true, useful, and appropriately timed. Renounce reactive, blurting out something, even sometimes it's true, that's just not the appropriate time to say it. So that practice of renunciation, of being careful with our communication. Renouncing earning money in a way that is going to create negative karma for us, right? Livelihood. And the Buddha gave a few examples of you don't want to earn money because it'll create negative karma for you if you're selling drugs, if you're selling intoxicants, if you're selling weapons. Not only don't kill, but also don't sell instruments of killing. Poisons, weapons. You don't want to profit. You don't want to be an arms dealer. You don't want to be a drug dealer. selling people. He said also he was quite down on pimping. That's negative karma. Don't sell each other. Don't pimp each other. So there's some specific teachings of things to renounce, to avoid in the Eightfold Path. And then one of my favorite teachings, a wealthy person comes to the Buddha and says, I see that you are a celibate, a renunciate. You've given up sex, you've given up money. The background story, most of you are aware, is that the Buddha came from a wealthy family and didn't take his inheritance, walked away from his kingdom, and this wealthy man who's it's an Anathapindika, one of the main donors, supporters of the Buddha, comes to him in one teaching and says, I see how happy you are and free and enlightened, and what a blessing you are. You're constantly of service, you're guiding us, you're teaching us about mindfulness and renunciation and wisdom. And he said, I'm busy making money. And he's like, I love to give my money to the Sangha, but should I give it all up? Would I want to be a blessing? Would it be better for me to be a full-time monastic renunciate? Do I have to do that in order to be to have that kind of effect? Do I have to give up my stuff? Do I have to give up my responsibilities, my money? And this can be confusing for us. I know for me, I grapple with this some. A lot of my teachers are monks, and it's like they're the real full-time Buddhists, and they're celibate, and they really dedicated themselves to the Buddhist path of celibacy and renunciation and no money, and full-time Buddhists, not us part-time Buddhist hobbyists. Mm-hmm. The Buddha says to Anathapindika, he says, my teaching, the core of my teaching, does not necessitate anybody give up anything except clinging. And I think that this is the important, the core piece. That's not about the materialism. It's not about, yes, it is the precepts. Yes, there's ethical behavior that's necessary, but the core of it is not clinging. And he goes on in that back and forth with Anathapindika, where he says, if you're going to cling to your stuff, your wealth, which is the definition of greed, clinging to materialism, greed. He said, if you have greed, if you're going to cling to your money, then better to give it all away, throw it all away, than let it poison your heart, let it create that karma of greed. Better to fully renounce all material things than to let it poison your heart. He said, but it is quite possible to have a non-attached and responsible relationship to money, and to be a blessing to people, and to not cling to it, to not be attached to it. And there is an interesting line for us to find between non-clinging and irresponsibility. A responsible, non-attached relationship to money and things. Renounce clinging. He said, and then the other thing he said also, my teaching necessitates giving up all clinging to material things, and also all clinging to a permanent self, self-centeredness. If all of the clinging to I, me, mine. That self-centeredness will create suffering for you every time. Every time we're coming from the I, me, mine, and believing in a permanent self, and being identified with our personality or our ego as who we are, then that's a dead end. And so give up clinging to your stuff and to yourself, and then also you can just be free. Such a simple equation. Let go. Let go. So renunciation as a central part of the Buddha's teaching, and very important, that I think for the most part, I don't know if this is true, but I think that for renunciation to really stick, we have to have insight into why we're doing it. Rather than like, I'm going to do it because it's the Buddha's teaching, or it's kind of the rules of Buddhism, or we have to really, and this is where meditation, where mindfulness, we have to see like, I'm going to not do this because it hurts me. I'm not going to not lie because lying hurts me. Hurting other people hurts me. It blocks my happiness. It blocks my freedom. I'm committed to being as free as possible, as happy as possible. And hatred, even when it seems justified, hurts me, creates suffering in my life. Even when it seems like they deserve it. I deserve to not suffer, so I'm going to free myself from hatred. And it takes a while to get to that place where we're practicing renunciation, not because it's the suggestions and it's the teachings, but because it's coming from a place of compassion for ourselves. I'm going to not behave in these ways that some of them are quite fun, but it hurts me, so I'm not going to do it. It creates suffering in my life, so I'm not going to do it. I talked about a couple weeks ago a little bit of an obscure teaching from the Buddha where he's having this conversation. I think it's with one of the kings. And he says, you know, the thing is that often people are doing things that are pleasant, but that are hurting them. Like someone who has leprosy. And like if you have leprosy and your body is, you know, eating itself or whatever happens there. And I guess like if you've maybe you've lost some fingers or you've lost a hand or something and it's quite itchy. And so he's using the example of a leper putting the leper, whatever that's called, the kind of necrotic skin into the fire because it feels good, because of, you know, but it feels good. It gives you some relief because it's so itchy. And when you burn the necrotic skin, it actually makes it worse, even though it feels good to put your necrotic limbs into the fire. He said, that's how most people are with pleasure. We're doing these things that we think feel good that actually hurt us. The lying, the stealing, the exaggerating, the minimizing, the, you know, in the karma of like not having the conflict when it's the appropriate conflict to have, and being like, just because like it feels better to avoid it. But it's actually hurting me to avoid it, rather than facing that discomfort of the conflict, of the honest communication that we need to have. So true renunciation, so there's all these suggestions, and that we all have to find our own way with it. But I feel like it really ultimately comes from a place of insight. When we really see the impermanent nature of things and how clinging causes suffering, we start to let go. When we see that pleasure is too impermanent to ever be the source of true happiness, we start to renounce the addiction to pleasure. When we start to see that most of our suffering takes place in our mind, we start to renounce the identification with our mind as self. We start to see the impersonal, not self nature of the mind. The insight that comes from sitting meditation. And you start to see, oh, I sit here and all of the sensations are changing. The body's breathing all by itself. The heart is beating all by itself. And my mind is thinking all by itself. I've been taking it all so personal. I've been so identified with my thoughts, my memories, my plans, my doubts, my fears, my worries. And you start to, meditation leads to that understanding of like, it's not that personal. It's just the human condition. The mind thinks about itself all the time. Not your fault. Not that personal. So some of my thoughts about the Dharma, about renunciation, I'd like to open it up for communication about anything that I've said or any other thoughts that you have, questions, comments. Please, Tibby. Tibby asked if we can renounce aversion, or is that aversion itself? There's like I started to say earlier, like renounce the unwholesome. There's a place where the Buddha says, you can abandon the unwholesome and you can cherish and cultivate the wholesome. So abandoning, renouncing is very much part of the practice. And aversion is a core cause of suffering. So absolutely, we should abandon the belief that aversion to what's happening is ever the appropriate solution. Now, that having been said, I said earlier, good luck, right? You can set this strong determination, like, I'm never going to be aversive again. Yeah, fucking right. It's so wired into us to be aversive. But the more we see, oh, when I do that, when I meet it with resistance, with aversion, I make it worse. So I'm going to try to meet life with more acceptance, with more tolerance, with more compassion, which doesn't mean I won't sometimes have good boundaries and kind of say no, and right? Doesn't mean that sometimes the right answer isn't absolutely fucking not, without that being from a place of aversion, but from a place of just like wisdom. No, that's not the no. No doesn't always have to be aversive. It's just the wise response. There is something healthy about being averse to suffering. Part of the reason we are practicing the Dharma is because we don't want to suffer so much. Like we could classify that as aversion to dukkha, suffering. And it's one of the healthy ones. It's one of, there's a place, the flip side of that is the desire for truth. Dhamma chanda, the desire for the Dharma, for knowing reality as it is. The healthy desire. It's not a craving, it's not a greed, it's not a unhealthy lust, it's a healthy desire. So there are healthy things to be averse to, like suffering. If there's any thoughts at home, you can raise your hand in the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. Please, Michelle.
So then I've been sort of reflecting on acceptance, and in order to, I think, understand what I'm renouncing, I need to, after that, accept it, right? What's the difference, in your opinion, and I have my own ideas, between acceptance and resignation?
What are your ideas?
Oh. I think there's a little bit of some clinging and attachment and aversion to resignation, like, oh, okay, so there's a little suffering still involved, I think, versus acceptance, which is a clear sight of where I'm at. I just answered my question.
Sounds good to me. And I feel like part of the humility, could people at home hear the question she asked and answered, which was, what's the difference between acceptance and resignation? And then her reflections were that that in resignation there seems to be a little bit of aversion and some suffering in the resignation, and that acceptance seems more no suffering about it, kind of true acceptance. Part of the humility of being on a spiritual path is that we're not going to do it perfectly. And we're going to try, you get the instructions of non-attachment, you get the instructions of radical acceptance, and then you realize, like, oh, a lot of time when I'm trying to do acceptance, I'm doing resignation. I'm, kind of feeling sorry for myself that I don't get, I'm, giving, that I have to give up something I don't want to give up, or and then there's just the humility of like, yeah, I don't do it right all the time. I don't have perfect self-love, self-acceptance. I have self-pity, resignation, and just accepting that that's just where I'm at this point. I'm going to keep working on self-acceptance. I'm going to keep working on compassion, even though, I'm kind of we start with aversion and then compassion's over here. I'm not over here yet in compassion. I'm somewhere in the middle of tolerance. And tolerance isn't compassion, but it's not as much suffering as aversion. And when we're on this path, this process of becoming wise and compassionate and accepting and loving and forgiving, and there's a lot of humility to it. And I don't even remember who it was, but I heard this wonderful quote from some teacher a long time ago that said, meditation is one insult after another. The spiritual path, as you look at your own mind and you think, I'm going to be loving and kind and wise and accepting, and your mind is just like, you're a piece of shit. You're not doing it right. And you can't even accept right. You're just in resignation, and just the mind insulting itself over and over and over. And that's part of the process of awakening, is sitting with the insulting nature of the ego mind. Amy, go ahead, jump in.
Thanks for that Dharma talk, Michelle. There's a piece of intention. I struggle with intention. I feel like I'm missing something in it. And there's a piece of it, like in an intention setting kind of thing. There's a piece of it to me that feels like I'm saying, okay, if I say I'm going to do this thing, then my life will be better. If I do this in the future and things are better. And I just, I can't quite get my head around, I guess, the purpose of intention outside of the present moment. Does that make any sense?
Everybody could hear, pretty much, yeah. Sometimes we, even this talk tonight, we look at our lives and we say, I really want to be free. I really want to be happy. I really want to be wise and kind, and I want to be I want to be a good person. And then we look at our lives and be like, oh, but there's all of these things that I'm doing that aren't wise, that aren't loving, that aren't so good. And we have to make that determination, that intention to be like, okay, I see that I'm not as honest as I could be, or I'm not as kind as I could be, or as generous, or as forgiving, or accepting, or compassionate. And I know that those are prerequisites to the kind of happiness that I want to have. So I'm going to set a strong intention to be more honest, to be more kind, to be more generous, to be more compassionate. Because yes, it's only in the moment that we can choose that, but there is something about that intentional. I really want to go north. And I know that often I meander to the east and west, and sometimes even head south. So I'm going to really set this intention that my life is going to go north. And north is honesty, integrity, kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. And so I'm going to over and over reestablish the intention of the direction that I want to go in my life. Of course, it can only be done moment to moment, as you said, only in this moment can I truly choose compassion or kindness or generosity. But in a general sense, I can remind, it's kind of like taking a lot of Buddhists take the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts every morning in order to remind themselves, today I'm going to do my best to be honest and nonviolent and wise and careful and sober. And I'm going to take refuge in awakening and in the reality as it is and in the community that I'm in. So the intentions, that reminding, maybe even some of it's like, our mind has a negativity bias, and the kind of the neuroscience of the human mind is one of self-centeredness and aversion and clinging. And so the intentions is saying like, hey, I'm not going to just let my mind do whatever it wants. My mind wants to judge and fear and compare and crave, but I'm going to set those intentions of being kind and non-attached and forgiving and all of those things. I know you've heard this one at one point, the and this doesn't totally fit. But at one point the Buddha said, well, how does meditation work? How does loving kindness or compassion meditation work? And he said something like, it's like if you were dropping water on a stone and it would just like bounce off. But if you keep dropping that drip of water on a stone over and over and over, eventually it'll create a groove in the stone. It'll create a dent in the stone. And in some ways, this is like 2,600-year-old neuroscience of neural pathways. If you set that intention to be kind and to tell the truth and to forgive over and over and over, pretty soon your mind will develop the habits of kindness and honesty and forgiveness and compassion, because you intentionally, even though in the beginning it just sort of bounces off. So I'm going to be kind, and your mind says, go fuck yourself. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be kind, until the mind becomes kind. Something like that. Hope that was helpful. Misty, go ahead. Last one.
Hi. You mentioned that wise confrontation is, or talk. You really spoke to me today, because I'm having a problem with my boss, and his business has been going in the toilet for about a year, and I see him lash out at people, and he's lashed out at me, and I guess I was avoiding it, and I guess I was actually spiritually bypassing. I'd be like, I'm not going to I've even told him, I'm not skillful enough to have this conversation with you, so I have to leave the room. And I would just leave the room. But now it's gotten to the point where I'm not going to take your shit. But at the same time, I really don't think I'm skillful enough to stick up for myself without having that, I have a harsh tongue. And I don't know if I would be able to say the things that I would like to say without going there. Should I just go there and just wish myself the best and try to come from a place of compassion and call it practice? Or do I continue just to wish him well and hope that, just send him love and kindness?
I don't know. Well, it's so tricky, right? Because you're going to get yourself fired if you're too, like.
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't care about being fired.
Yeah.
And he pretty much is in a place where he couldn't fire me, but even if he did, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But what I'm more worried about is my practice. What would be more skillful to walk in and use it as practice? And when that happens again, just go ahead and step into it, or continue to just stop. And you're in this place, and I'm going to release you from the karma that you're creating for yourself.
In a situation like this, I might suggest more like some journaling, some like write about it, and maybe even write a letter to him, so that it's not, like you said, you have the sharp tongue. And sometimes when we take our time and we reflect on what we want to say, it's easier to do in a kind of, when we write it down and then we present it, when we're not in a reactive place, rather than kind of wait until he pisses you off tomorrow at work and go in there and give him a piece of your mind. Might be better to take some time and be like, these are all of the things that I want to share, how it's affecting me. So you might find a way to do it that's not too confrontational in that way. But in the long term, I feel like what I was referring to, seeing this in myself some, and experiencing in a lot of people, where there's that like dishonesty, that avoidance of not having conversations that are important to have. I feel like I have a kind of special kind of trigger to this, because for whatever reason, my parents, not my mom, but my father, my stepmother, were very dishonest about things. Even they were like spiritual teachers, and they justified their dishonesty of like, this will, we're not telling you the truth because the truth will hurt you. And they lied to the kids a lot. They lied to me and the other kids a lot. And I just kind of have this like attachment, to like, no, we need to tell the truth to each other, even if it's going to hurt each other, that it's actually okay for people to be hurt when it's appropriate, when it's the truth and it's appropriate. It's okay for people. Even my father on his deathbed, I said, well, what's going on with you? And he wouldn't tell me. And it's just this sort of like, shut downness. And it's like, it was totally appropriate for him to tell me what was going on in that time. And he just didn't. And it was hurtful that then I never got to know what was really going on. So, I feel like it's quite important for us to tell the truth when the truth is appropriate, even if it might hurt the other person a little bit. It's okay. People can be hurt. We can handle pain. That's so much of what the Dharma teaches us. It's okay. Not the intention to hurt, but that sometimes it's going to hurt anyways. It's useful. So we'll end there tonight. It's about out of time. I hope you all join me tomorrow night, New Year's Eve. We'll do 7 p.m. till around 9. Maybe try to get done within 2 hours. We do a short meditation. We do a reflection on the 5 precepts and on the 3 refuges. We do a candle lighting ceremony where you can reflect on your intentions for 2025. You can light a candle. You can say it to the room. We will do it so that those at home can also be part of it. If you're doing it from home, don't forget to bring your own candle and your own piece of string for your blessing cord. And I'll put up the refuges and precepts on the, I'll share the screen for that. There's 3 price points for New Year's Eve. You can pay $50 and support the center as an act of generosity. You can pay $25 as a kind of partial, scholarship, or you can come for free, or you can just give whatever you want to give. The last couple of years, I made it $50 and a bunch of people paid it. But this year I was like, I hate to exclude anybody that can't afford it. I want everybody to be able to be here. So if you can afford $50, give the center $50. It doesn't come to me. It goes to Against the Stream, pays the rent on this place. If you can't afford that, know that you're welcome to be here regardless of ability to pay. And if you want to register online, you need it's not this Zoom link, you need the Zoom link. You need to do that through the Against the Stream site, and it'll give you the Zoom link for tomorrow. And the the May 13th to 18th 5-day Silent Joshua Tree retreat is open for registration. And I hope that a lot of you come to this 5-day meditation retreat in the desert in May 13th to 18th. So, yep. I think it's a little bit unlimited. That place is so big. We can take, somewhere between, 30 and 100. We've had retreats out there before with over 100, and we've had small retreats out there before. So a little bit unlimited, but also important to register early to make sure that you get your spot and that we know how many people are coming. So, yeah. Would I forget, Sebastian? Okay. Many good. Donna, don't forget to donate. Thank you in advance for being generous. And many goodness that comes from our reflection on renunciation, our practice of meditation. Be a benefit to each one of us, to each other, to this whole world. May we get as free as possible. And together, may we create a positive change on this planet.